The Death of Right and Wrong, Exposing the Left's Assault on Our Culture and Values. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How has the left assaulted our culture and values?
Well, it is a place where I come from. I was the president of Los Angeles chapter of NOW for 7 years, was on the National NOW Board of Directors. I'm an openly gay woman, AIDS activist, did a lot of work within gay civil rights as well. And what I noticed is that beyond the idea of individual liberty and personal freedom, there was an assault on some very basic tenets of civility and values. Today we see it in the range of sexualizing children, that homosexual academics are moving, people like Judith Levine with her book Harmful to Minors. We can see it in the Hollywood arena. You just look at the last Academy Awards, disparaging the war in Iraq, saying they're for the underdog, and then the next thing they do is they give an Oscar to a child molester and a standing ovation. It's a moral relativism that tells the American people that coming to judgment is a bad idea, that if we challenge what anyone wants to do, any idea, any action, we are threatening the idea of individual liberty. Whereas in fact, for me as a liberal, I'm a registered Democrat, the concepts of decency and morality don't have to be excised from our lives. There especially should be a fundamental part of who we are as we also exercise our individual liberty. It has to be a defining point about who we're becoming, whether we be feminist, gay, black Americans. As we finally have individual cultural freedom, the more important dynamic of what shapes our character are the choices we make within that framework. And the left, I contend, not the average individual, but the book is about the left elite, saying that, all right, we've gone this far, now we want to go further. The Levine argument, as an example, is that sex with children is the last taboo. Now, I don't want that done in my name as a gay woman, that I can have individual freedom in the privacy of my life without demanding that society give up every idea of judgment, that judgment, in fact, isn't bad for the quality of our lives, that we can say we can go this far and not any further and become decent people again.
One of the chapters in your book, First the Culture, Then the Children, the Agenda of the Radical Gay Elite. Mm-hmm. This is what you were referring to.
Yes, exactly. And the issue is when you read this, there has to be a realization that for me, and I think for the average gay person, the average liberal person, it's dangerous to speak out and say, wait a minute, I like the progress we've made. My life depends, as an example, on the tolerance of other people. But then I don't want to support sex with adolescent boys. That doesn't need to be about individual personal freedom. That it also is not about necessarily religion. I'm not a religious woman. That there is a difference between human nature and our character as Americans, which makes this country the greatest place on earth, is because while we do have freedom of expression, which is what my first book was about, The New Thought Police, that has value only because while we can do whatever we want, we choose not to. That's what develops the character, that we're able to have the freedom to make the choices about how far we go, who we're willing to hurt, if we have to hurt anyone, that if we can in fact be radical individualists while being decent people, and I think we can.
Is this the same argument that Dan Quayle used in 1992?
Well, it's interesting. Murphy Brown? I mentioned that in the book. Even Candace Bergen agreed, and she said that, of course, not at the time. Years later said, you know what, he was right. It's a message that we're sending that isn't necessarily the best message of all. Dan Quayle, as usual, of course, as people do with their opponents, misquote them, take them out of context. His actual comments are in the book. Candace Bergen's comments after the fact, who's a great feminist and a wonderful actor, said, yes, he was right. She's a mother now, so now she knows perhaps the difference. What I discuss there is the leadership, is the malignant narcissism that has infected all of us, which keeps us from being able to look at the impact of our actions on others and really assess, is what's perhaps best for me as an individual, best for other people? And can we stop our self-obsessed self-interest for 1 second and say, okay, wait a minute, it's nothing bad, the sky's not going to fall and cats aren't going to sleep with dogs. If we say this particular agenda, it's like now, let's say, supporting Andrea Yates, which they did, the woman who murdered her 5 children in Texas.
You're saying that the liberal left supported Andrea Yates?
Now went on the record, the National Organization for Women went on the record saying that women who kill their children should have a special dispensation because women's lives are so difficult. Childbirthing is so difficult. Religion is so difficult. Can you really blame her? There were columnists who were saying that as well. Now, my feminism isn't about letting women get away with murder. My homosexuality is a private dynamic. It's not about forcing a no-boundary dynamic about sexual expression. We live in a world where we should show other individuals some respect and dignity. It should go both ways, not just from one element into, say, the radical left-wing fringe, and because we all live in one community. And I think that when you're looking at what the feminist, gay, black civil rights organizations have done through a malignant narcissistic leadership, which has now even abandoned their own constituency, and the Democratic Party is dealing with this now, how can you really continue to deal with the constituency that you have left behind, that you can't relate to any longer? I should say the constituency has left behind their leadership, but still you've got people who are claiming to represent blacks or gays or feminists, women in this nation, or Democrats, who now are completely out of touch with what those people want, and in fact are creating actions that are harming those constituencies. I am harmed when the homosexual academic elite says in my name that sex with children is okay. I'm harmed as a feminist when now says if you're a woman, murder is not murder, it's postpartum depression. I'm harmed as a Democrat when you have Democratic candidates say, let's be isolationist, we're the party of the underdog, but let those Iraqi women fend for themselves, let everyone else suffer, because after all, what Susan Sarandon said is, gosh, what has Saddam Hussein ever done for us or done to us? The reality is that we have to get out of, and in the Kennedy dynamic of liberalism, is helping other people, is dealing with individuals who are harming other people's lives. We have the courage, we have the wherewithal, we have the means, and if we are only going to act, if Susan Sarandon was head of foreign policy, if someone has done something to us, we'd be isolationist and we'd have a first half of the century like we did this last one.
You've mentioned that you're gay. Do you support gay rights legislation?
It depends on what it is. I don't like the hate crimes legislation. It piggybacks a thought crime on top of an already existing crime. We are telling America that some people who are murdered are more important than other people. In my first book, I talk about Matthew Shepard. And in the same year, a young woman was murdered in Laramie named Daphne Salk, 15 years old, murdered by her 38-year-old lover, obviously molester. She was pregnant, refused to have an abortion. I'm a pro-choice activist. He stabbed her 17 times with a butcher knife, left her to die in the Laramie foothills. That wasn't a hate crime. Now, while Matthew's murderers were convicted and got away from the death penalty only because of Matthew's forgiving mother, Daphne's murderer was convicted of manslaughter. Now, I contend that because you can't do anything more with someone convicted of a hate crime, we can't torture them to death, you can't convict them twice, we have to show the difference in value of life, and what we did there, what the same community did, was it devalued Daphne's life. That's not fair, it's not appropriate, and for what it does to the American people is it prepares us for the prosecution of not even a thought. Think about it, hate is not a thought, it's feeling. It prepares the American people for the prosecution of what we feel. Now, every murder has an element of hate, but we've decided to prosecute only certain feelings and certain hate for certain groups. And if I'm going to be, as a gay person and a feminist, demanding that I'm accepted and we want an even, equal playing field and be treated like everyone else, now that we're in cultural power, we're saying the opposite. We're saying you had better treat us better than everyone else. You had better not have the same expectations of us. Personal responsibility is too complicated. Expecting, if I'm murdered, I want to be treated. Now, it's very flattering. If I'm murdered, it's pretty flattering for the FBI to say that's a special murder. That's not what my feminism or my gay rights activism or what it was in the 60s was meant to be. And because we do have cultural power, I think we have a special duty to watch the decisions we make and what we become in the exercising of that power.